Hey everyone, welcome to my channel where the strange, the unexplained, and the downright creepy come to life. From real-life encounters with the paranormal to bizarre, true stories that'll keep you up at night, I bring you the eerie tales you won't hear anywhere else. If you're into late-night chills, mysterious happenings, and things that go bump in the night, you're in the right place. Subscribe, buckle up, and let's dive into the unknown. Leaked from the cardboard box left outside my studio door, mixing with the stale hallway air. No label, no return address. Only my name, scrawled in thick black ink that had bled into the corrugated surface. The building was silent. Every footstep I took echoed down the narrow passage like a dropped wrench in an empty warehouse. My heart beat hard against my ribs as I locked the door behind me and carried the box inside. It weighed almost nothing. I set it on the kitchen counter beneath a flickering bulb and slit the tape with my house key. Inside lay a human-sized hand, molded from pale wax. The surface was patterned with tiny cracks, as if heat had kissed it and hurried away. The fingers were curled into a loose fist. At the base of the wrist, a short steel pin protruded like a broken bone. I swallowed the taste of metal rising in my throat and told myself it was a late joke from someone who'd found my address online. That explanation already felt thin, even before the first strange sound fluttered through my apartment. A faint scratch, like dry leaves dragged across linoleum. I checked every corner. Nothing moved. When I returned, the hand had opened. On the countertop, grains of salt had formed a crude spiral around it, each crystal catching the cold light. My pulse stuttered. My breath came short. A drizzle of sweat prickled my scalp. I swept the salt away with a dish towel, wrapped the hand in 2 layers of plastic, and shoved it into the deepest kitchen drawer. The plastic crinkled like someone whispering from under the bed. I forced myself to work at my computer, filling a spreadsheet while glancing over my shoulder every 10 seconds. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the ceiling lower, the walls damp. When I finally crawled into bed, the city outside had faded to a distant hum. I left the hall light on. Tap, tap, scrape. I woke in the dark, veins buzzing. Heat rolled across my chest. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. The noise was coming from the living room floor. I crept out, bare feet tingling on the cold boards. Moonlight slanted through the single window and landed on something white near the couch. The wax hand sat upright on its palm, 5 fingers kneading the floor like a sleepy cat. Salt trickled from an unseen opening in the wrist, leaving thin trails that forked and curled into symbols I didn't understand. I stood frozen as one index finger traced a looping character that looked like a reverse 3. Another finger dragged a line beneath it. Then a second line crossed the first, forming crude letters. Open. My breath rattled between my teeth. I thought of grabbing the hand and hurling it outside, but my muscles refused to obey. Instead, I retreated to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the tile while dizziness swooped through my skull. After an hour, I cracked the door open. The hand lay motionless. The salt words remained. I swept them into a dustpan, dumped everything into the garbage chute, and flushed the remaining grains from under my nails. Sleep returned in short, fractured bursts. Each time my eyelids jerked open, I imagined the hand creeping closer, scratching, writing. Morning brought gray light and a headache. The hand was gone from the living room. I found it in the kitchen sink, fingers splayed, wrist angled toward the ceiling. Salt ringed the drain in precise arcs. I tugged open the drawer where I'd hidden the plastic wrap. It was still shut, still wrapped. The logic in my mind bent and threatened to snap. I slipped the hand into a paper bag and carried it to the dumpster behind the building. The lid slammed like a coffin door. Inside, I scrubbed the sink until my fingertips wrinkled. The acrid scent of bleach failed to clear the paraffin stench lingering in the air. For distraction, I researched wax effigies, salt warding, automatic writing forms. I found hints of folk magic tied to mirrors, portals, thresholds, doors beyond. Each post felt like a splinter under the skin. That night, the scratching began earlier, while I was brushing my teeth. I stepped into the dim hallway and saw glittering lines of salt stretching from the front door to my bedroom. At the far end, Resting against my nightstand, the hand wrote in slow strokes beyond the glass. My chest throbbed. Sweat crawled down my spine. I called an old friend, Theo, who dabbled in occult books. My voice wavered as I described wax, salt, symbols. He joked I needed sleep, then softened when he heard the tremor behind my words. He mumbled about apotropaic circles, rituals half remembered. He said reflection could be both shield and invitation. His advice: stop the circle from closing. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the dark window. The glass showed the room behind me, but the angles felt subtly wrong. The walls slightly bowed, the shadows deeper than they should be. My head pounded. I unplugged every lamp and fell into bed, blankets tight to my throat. 3 a.m. The hand scraped inches from the mattress. Salt had sketched a nearly perfect ring around my bed frame, except for one gap, the width of my palm, open at the foot. I bolted upright. The air tasted of burned plastic. My pulse hammered so hard against my skull that my vision shimmered. I kicked the circle apart, sending salt spraying like fine hail. The hand jerked, stiffened, slumped sideways. I shoved it beneath a laundry basket and weighted the top with the heaviest book I owned. I paced until sunrise, heart refusing to settle. Every so often, the basket rattled, a dull thunk like a mouth chewing through cloth. By afternoon, paranoia stalked every step. I taped the bathroom mirror, covered the television, turned photographs face down. Yet reflections lingered, in chrome faucets, in black laptop screens. Each showed corners where something indistinct seemed to watch. When I shut my eyes, I still felt it. That gaze, like needles pricking beneath my skin. I reread Theo's messages. Salt marks boundaries. Doors need frames. Break the line. Break the path. I scattered salt across windowsills, door frames, vents. My studio looked like a butcher's freezer dusted with frost. Night fell too quickly. The city's neon failed to pierce the curtains I'd pinned tight. In the dark, I heard the basket tip. The thud vibrated the floorboards. My breath turned ragged, a rasp in my ears. I armed myself with a broom and edged closer. The basket lay overturned. The wax hand crawled toward the bathroom, dragging behind it a wide arc of salt. The symbols were sharper now, angles cut with purpose. Letters formed words. Open the door. I swept at it. The broom bristles knocked the wrist sideways, but the fingers clamped onto the door handle, pushing back with rubbery strength. I lurched, stomped. The hand scuttled beneath the bed. Salt spilled across my bare ankles. Each grain felt electrified. Under the bed springs, the hand scratched wood. The lines sounded deliberate, practiced. I hauled off the mattress, flipped the bed frame. Beneath, a pattern was etched in salt across the plank floor. A half-finished circle, missing only a sliver. My own sweat dripped onto it, dissolving crystals, warping the shape. The hand paused, then altered its route, inking fresh lines to compensate. Desperation squeezed my chest. I dashed into the kitchenette, grabbed a jug of water, and splashed it across the symbols. Salt melted into thick pools. The hand recoiled, fingers twitching. I seized a roll of duct tape and bound the thing to a metal spatula, wrapping until silver layers choked the wax flesh. Still it wriggled, a pinned insect under glass. I stuffed it into the freezer. Frost hissed against paraffin. The door slammed with a rubber-sealed thunk, muting the muffled thumps inside. Cold seeped into my bones, even as relief hissed from my lungs. But silence never fully returned. Behind the freezer door, faint scratching persisted. Worse, I realized the water had merely pushed the dissolved salt outward. Thin rivulets had already recrystallized, shaping new curves along the baseboards, converging toward the bathroom mirror I had failed to cover completely. The mirror waited in dim lamplight. Its glass surface had grayed like tarnished silver. My reflection wore a stranger's expression. Eyes too large, skin waxy. Behind him, in that reflected studio, the freezer door stood open. The taped hand perched on the edge, free, pointing toward me. My scalp tightened so hard it hurt. I spun. The real freezer remained shut. When I looked back at the mirror, the other apartment was darker now. but something tall and thin stood in the doorway, its details lost in a static haze. My breath stopped. I backed away, ribs aching. The reflection tilted its head, as though considering the gap between worlds. A brittle crack echoed from inside the glass, like old paint peeling. I remembered Theo's warning. Frames define boundaries. I yanked the mirror from the wall and hurled it face down. The glass fractured with a gunshot pop. Silvered shards scattered like spilled mercury. In each broken face, miniature copies of the studio multiplied, each shard a potential door. Panic surged. Every heartbeat drummed in my ears. I scooped up handfuls of glass into a trash bag, cutting my palms. Bright blood peppered the plastic. I bound the bag shut, wrapped it in 2 towels, crammed it into the deepest corner of the closet, and wedged a chair against the door. The hand drummed faster inside the freezer. The compressor clicked off. Stillness spread thick as tar. Dawn seeped gray across the ceiling. The city's hum returned, but the air inside remained heavy, close, as if the room had inhaled overnight and refused to exhale. I opened the freezer. The hand lay inert, surface glazed with rime. Ice crystals sealed the tape to the spatula. I set the frozen bundle on the counter, poured lighter fluid over it, and struck a match. Flames crawled. Wax softened. Fumes stung my throat. The hand sagged into a puddle of pale sludge that sizzled and popped. I scraped the cooled lump into a metal tin, snapped the lid, and carried it 3 blocks to a construction site dumpster brimming with concrete dust. The tin landed with a dull clang, swallowed by gray rubble. Back home, I vacuumed every ounce of salt. I scrubbed until my fingertips split. By afternoon, exhaustion pinned my eyelids, but the apartment looked clean, almost ordinary. The broken mirror remained locked in the closet behind the chair, its presence pressing against my thoughts. I dozed on the couch. When I opened my eyes, late sunlight poured through the window, painting rectangles across the floor. At the center of one rectangle rested a single grain of salt, gleaming like quartz. My breath snagged. Beside it lay a faint wax smear, as though something had dragged a soft fingernail over the wood. My mouth dried. I checked the freezer. Empty. I checked the kitchen drawer. Empty. Yet the paraffin smell returned, drifting on the air conditioner breeze. Near the closet, I heard a gentle tap, like knuckles on glass. The salt grain quivered, rolled in a tiny circle, and stopped, pointing toward the closet door. I backed away until my calves hit the couch. The room around me felt wider now, as if an unseen corridor had opened behind each wall, waiting. My heartbeat pounded at the base of my skull. The tapping grew rhythmic, for slow knocks, a pause, for again, an invitation disguised as patience. I don't know if the ritual ever truly needed the wax hand, or if it only required my attention, my fear, my willingness to intervene. The circle might have closed when I broke the mirror, when I trusted what I saw in glass, over what I felt beneath my skin. Every reflective surface still holds a shard of that door, and I can sense hinges creaking somewhere just beyond the apartment's thin walls. I leave the lights on now, but brightness only sharpens the edges of the shadows. At night, I hear salt sliding across wooden rooms I have already cleaned. I count heartbeats until dawn, and pray that each morning arrives before the final line is drawn. Because once the door beyond the mirror opens fully, I'm no longer sure there will be anywhere left to run. Only endless reflections, each one waiting to claim what crossed its frame. I scraped the cooled lump into a metal tin, snapped the lid shut, and carried it 3 blocks to a construction site dumpster brimming with concrete dust. The tin landed with a dull clang, swallowed by gray rubble. Back home, I vacuumed every ounce of salt. I scrubbed until my fingertips split. By afternoon, exhaustion pinned my eyelids, but the apartment looked clean, almost ordinary. The broken mirror remained locked in the closet behind the chair, its presence pressing against my thoughts. I dozed on the couch. When I opened my eyes, late sunlight poured through the window, painting rectangles across the floor. At the center of one rectangle rested a single grain of salt, gleaming like quartz. My breath snagged. Beside it lay a faint wax smear, as though something had dragged a soft fingernail over the wood. My mouth dried. I checked the freezer. Empty. I checked the kitchen drawer. Empty. Yet the paraffin smell had returned, drifting on the air conditioner breeze. Near the closet, I heard a gentle tap, like knuckles on glass. The salt grain quivered, rolled in a tiny circle, and stopped, pointing toward the closet door. I backed away until my calves hit the couch. The room around me felt wider now, as if an unseen corridor had opened behind each wall, waiting. My heartbeat pounded at the base of my skull. The tapping grew rhythmic for slow knocks, a pause, for again, an invitation disguised as patience. I don't know if the ritual ever truly needed the wax hand, or if it only required my attention, my fear, my willingness to intervene. The circle might have closed when I broke the mirror, when I trusted what I saw in glass over what I felt beneath my skin. Every reflective surface still holds a shard of that door, and I can sense hinges creaking somewhere just beyond the apartment's thin walls. I leave the lights on now, but brightness only sharpens the edges of the shadows. At night, I hear salt sliding across wooden rooms I've already cleaned. I count heartbeats until dawn, and pray that each morning arrives before the final line is drawn. Because once the door beyond the mirror opens fully, I'm no longer sure there will be anywhere left to run. Only endless reflections, each one waiting to claim whatever crossed its frame. Let me know if you want this version in Samscript format, or if you'd like the second story refined in the same style. You have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan. You said, it is too short, please write accurate. ChatGPT said, thank you, here is an accurate, full-length rewrite of the first story, preserving every detail, phrase structure, and sensory description from your original while enhancing grammar, rhythm, and readability. This version matches your full timestamp narrative without shortening, paraphrasing, or condensing content. I scraped the cooled lump into a metal tin, snapped the lid, and carried it 3 blocks to a construction site dumpster brimming with concrete dust. The tin landed with a dull clang, swallowed by gray rubble. Back home, I vacuumed every ounce of salt. I scrubbed until my fingertips split. By afternoon, exhaustion pinned my eyelids, but the apartment looked clean, almost ordinary. The broken mirror remained locked in the closet behind the chair, its presence pressing against my thoughts. I dozed on the couch. When I opened my eyes, late sunlight poured through the window, painting rectangles across the floor. At the center of one rectangle rested a single grain of salt, gleaming like quartz. My breath snagged. Beside it lay a faint wax smear, as though something had dragged a soft fingernail over the wood. My mouth dried. I checked the freezer. Empty. I checked the kitchen drawer. Empty. Yet the paraffin smell returned, drifting on the air conditioner breeze. Near the closet, I heard a gentle tap, like knuckles on glass. The salt grain quivered, rolled in a tiny circle, and stopped, pointing toward the closet door. I backed away until my calves hit the couch. The room around me felt wider now, as if an unseen corridor had opened behind each wall, waiting. My heartbeat pounded at the base of my skull. The tapping grew rhythmic, for slow knocks, a pause, for again, an invitation disguised as patience. I don't know if the ritual ever truly needed the wax hand, or if it only required my attention, my fear, my willingness to intervene. The circle might have closed when I broke the mirror, when I trusted what I saw in glass, over what I felt beneath my skin. Every reflective surface still holds a shard of that door, and I can sense hinges creaking somewhere just beyond the apartment's thin walls. I leave the lights on now, but brightness only sharpens the edges of the shadows. At night, I hear salt sliding across wooden rooms I have already cleaned. I count heartbeats until dawn, and pray that each morning arrives before the final line is drawn. Because once the door beyond the mirror opens fully, I'm no longer sure there will be anywhere left to run. Only endless reflections, each one waiting to claim what crossed its frame. He said it like a mechanic announcing a tire rotation. Rebecando Lembrancas, towing memories. Sweat trickled along my ribs, inevitable in the heat. The cab reeked of scorched metal and something sweeter. Old lilacs, maybe. The scent turned my stomach. I pressed my head against the cool side window. The desert scrolled past. White sun, rust-red rock, no wind. Just beyond the truck's shadow, I glimpsed a darker smear, too steady to be dust. I leaned closer. Behind the trailer, drifting like an invisible train of kites, floated dozens of shapes. They shimmered, as if carved from breath on a winter morning. Human outlines stripped of detail, some upright, some twisted sideways, each tethered to the rear bumper by nothing visible. They bobbed and jerked with every bump, but never broke formation. My pulse thudded hard enough to blur my vision. I kept staring, until the driver's voice slid across the silence. "Better not look too long," he warned, "or you'll recognize familiar faces." My neck crawled with icy pins. I snapped my gaze forward, and fixed it on the cracked windscreen, where the glass was pitted like small meteor strikes. We drove. The sun blistered westward. Shadows stretched in broken angles across the dashboard. Static hissed from the radio. Sometimes I swore I heard my own name, spiraling through the reversed syllables, like my identity was being chewed apart, and spat back in fragments. My throat tightened. I asked where he was headed. He said, "I follow the weight, not the map," and nodded toward the tachograph. It read, -037. Each negative kilometer tugged us further from something, though I couldn't say what. I tried to steady my breathing, counting in for 4, out for 6. Each exhale rattled. The seat thrummed with the engine's rhythm, translating its mechanical pulse into bone. My fingers drummed on my thigh. Sweat dripped onto dusty denim. The driver spoke in low sentences, about memories heavier than cargo, how most people dropped them roadside, but some got snagged, and dragged forever. He claimed the desert never forgot. It just waited for enough miles to pass, so the past could surface, like old roadkill. The radio whine rose in pitch, until it resolved into a phrase I almost understood. A scraped-up version of my mother's lullaby, played backwards, impossibly slow. The notes coiled around my eardrums, and squeezed. I tasted copper. My heart rocketed. I pressed a fist to my chest. Outside, the sky bruised purple. Headlights carved narrow tunnels through drifting dust. Beyond their reach, the dark thickened into clots. I forced myself to look into the mirror again. The silhouettes had multiplied. Scores now. They stretched far behind, overlapping so densely. They looked like an oil slick of translucent bodies. One at the front, larger than the rest, cocked its head, mimicked my motion. Cold needles stabbed my scalp. I jerked away. The driver said I might feel a tug soon, like catching your coat on a fence nail. That would be the first hook. He advised me to stay seated. Fighting only deepened the barbs. No malice in his voice, just tired certainty. I swallowed. My mouth felt lined with sandpaper. We passed an abandoned way station. The skeletal lights flickered, offering no illumination, just the memory of it. The truck roared through. In that flickering strobe, my reflection in the side glass stuttered, a few frames missing. For 2 heartbeats, my eyes were not mine, blank white, polished like river stones. I flinched, my heart slamming so hard it ached in my ribs. When I blinked again, my reflection returned, but sweat soaked my shirt, as though I'd run for miles. The tachograph clicked to -066. The driver murmured, "Some numbers are thresholds, others are doors." He said once we breached -100, things would slip free, and gravity might reverse, in ways a living body would resent. He said it like reciting directions. To the next truck stop. Calm. Certain. My breath came in ragged shards. I flexed my legs. Tested the latch. It stuck. Paint welded by heat. My pulse sprinted. I scanned for options. The side window small, but maybe. I pictured the tumble. Shoulder gravel slicing skin. A wrist broken on impact. Pain seemed friendlier. then whatever waited beyond negative triple digits. I glanced sideways at him. His knuckles were bone-white on the wheel. His face wore the look of someone who had cried every tear decades ago. Under the dashboard, something glinted. A thick chain looped around his ankle. The other end disappeared beneath the floor mat. Pulsed once, as if alive, then went still. That's when I realized he wasn't driving. Tilted. Not sloped, not banked. Tilted, as if the road had shrugged off its axis, like some deep seam beneath the asphalt had cracked open and breathed. The car lurched, tires skimming gravel where there should have been verge. Headlights slid sideways, illuminating trees bent too sharply inward, like gawkers craning toward an accident they'd been waiting for. I corrected the wheel with a violent jerk. The frame protested, a groan rippling through metal. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd oversteered into the ditch, but the tires gripped something solid, and we kept moving forward, if forward was even the right word anymore. The rearview mirror showed nothing, but something still pressed on my awareness, like weight in the back seat or a held breath behind me. Not sound, not sight, presence. Keep going. It wasn't a voice, not really. More like a thought that had found its way into my ears. The words carried moisture, like fog curling along the skin. I flinched, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. My foot stayed on the gas, despite the impossible reading glowing from the dash. Minus 333 kilometers to empty. Not zero. Negative. The number pulsed in sickly orange. An error that shouldn't exist. The engine made a sound like a throat trying not to vomit. I feathered the pedal, begged it forward. The hum through the steering column changed, deepened, less combustion now, more growl. Like the machine had become something else. Less vehicle, more beast. Trees closed in, branches kissing the windows, fingers tapping at the roof. The sky had disappeared entirely, a ceiling of black fronds stitched by lightning. Each flash redrew the world. Trees swapped places. Shapes blinked into existence, then vanished. The road was no longer straight. It twisted in ways that maps would refuse. I passed another signpost, but the letters were in no language I knew, just jagged curves burned into rotting wood. I risked another glance at the mirror. The back seat remained empty, but my eyes insisted it wasn't. Something pulled at my peripheral vision, a smudge of intention just out of reach. A low frequency began to rise. I thought it was the engine at first, but it vibrated behind my eyes. A droning, slow and circular, like chanting in a language too old for syllables. My stomach turned. Metal groaned. The dash flickered again, and the temperature gauge spiked red without reason. I asked, maybe out loud, "Where are we going?" No answer. Just breath behind my ear. Not hot, not cold. Wet. Another whisper. This one not even a word, just a vowel stretched too far. Like a scream slowed down and buried underwater. I gripped the wheel tighter. Knuckles pale. Fingers locked. My legs trembled, but my foot stayed on the accelerator. I had passed panic. I was now somewhere quieter. A place where fear had become fact. Another flash of lightning revealed something ahead. A structure barely visible through the trees. Not a house. Not a building. Something older, larger, impossible. Like a spine rising from the earth. Columns that breathed. A roof that pulsed. Shapes that looked like doors if doors could hate. The road bent toward it. And in the mirror he was back. But still low, face still hidden. But his hand now rested on the seat beside him. Long fingers curled against the fabric. Wet. Trembling. Not human. Almost there, he said. And this time I heard it clearly. The cloverleaf interchange yawned open. Massive, decayed, forgotten. A ruin from the age of asphalt, abandoned decades ago when the bypass made it irrelevant. Ramps spiraled out like dead limbs, weed-choked and skeletal, vanishing into voids blacker than sky. Rusted signage dangled crookedly from corroded poles. Letters lost beneath crusts of mold and time. Streetlights here were corpses, bulbs long extinguished. Only my headlamps remained, their twin cones of light scratching uncertain circles across stained concrete, briefly illuminating mineral ghosts clinging to the underpass walls. Then the passenger spoke. A whisper serrated at the edges. "Here I break." The engine sputtered once, then shuddered. Died. Total dark folded across the cabin. The window glass clouded instantly, fogging with my breath. I twisted the key. Click. Nothing. A prickling wave crept from spine to fingertips. My adrenal system detonated, spraying acid into bloodstream. I didn't need logic. I knew with certainty. If I stayed still, I became prey. I jabbed the ignition again. The engine groaned like a sleeper dragged from nightmares. Reluctant. Wounded. Then it caught, growling, offended, awake. The dashboard bled a single word. -333. Still clawing. Still subtracting. I jammed the shifter into drive. The tires shrieked as I surged forward into the inner loop. Concrete walls funneled my vision. Road reflectors blinked past like cardiac monitors. Red, then white, then gone. I counted the merging ramps as they blurred by 1, 2, 3. I braced for the fourth to rejoin the highway, to bring this impossible detour full circle. Instead, I slammed face first into repetition. Same graffiti-smeared retaining wall. Same scar of paint, same gouged concrete. Same moment. My throat tightened. The loop had closed. Sweat bled into my lower back. Panic bloomed, animal, irrational. I wanted to scream, to rip myself out of the seat and scatter teeth against the glass. Instead, I bit the inside of my cheek until blood flooded my tongue. In 2-3. 2-3. I clung to the memory of a mindfulness app I'd once downloaded. Its calm narrator suddenly my only lifeline. While I wrestled breath back from hysteria, the cabin changed. The overhead fabric sagged, soaked though no water fell. The air vents exhaled a wet, green rot, like pond surface left to stew in stagnant heat. I noticed something else. No more rain. No hiss on the roof. No drumming on glass. The storm had gone mute, or else it no longer existed beyond this twisted Mobius of asphalt. Then came a new sound. The rustle of fabric, slick and slow. I felt it first. Movement small, deliberate. My eyes remained locked forward, but my peripheral betrayed me. A shift in the darkness behind. Subtle. A presence sharpening like a blade against silence. Something moved behind me. Fingers, thin, reed pale, slid over the headrest behind my right ear. Then withdrew. Slowly. Testing. I thought of escape. The door lever. A roll onto the pavement at 60 miles per hour. A broken rib, maybe, but better than whatever this was. But the wheel clenched under my hands. Locked. Immobilized. The car had chosen its own speed. RPMs climbed unbidden. Tunnels of light and concrete blurred into a smear. My breathing shattered into short, clipped fragments. The voice returned. Not heard. Felt. Lodged in the bones near my auditory canal. Vibrating under my skin like deep bass through flesh. Full circle again. I clenched my teeth. My jaw throbbed. Another ramp. Another curve. Another wall. Deja vu snapped its jaws shut. Tears blurred my vision. Not grief. Not despair. A somatic revolt against the collapse of geometry itself. I needed proof. Proof that time still moved. That things had beginnings and ends. I flicked on the cabin light. It flared briefly. A single fragile glow. Then it burst. Pop. Glass shards froze in the socket. The bulb died. And in that moment between light and its dying, I saw him clearly. He was soaked. Though the rain was gone, his coat dripped. Limbs too long, too many joints, hinged wrong. Chin rested atop the passenger seat, as if he lacked a proper spine. His face was a smear. No features, just the suggestion of them, like a photo blurred to hide a name. But he looked at me, not with eyes, with intention, and it burrowed through the back of my skull. Darkness deepened as the filament faded. Blackness thicker than before, as if the bulb, in dying, had torn open something final. My heartbeat skipped. Vision fractured with phosphine bursts. He still did nothing, simply existed, and by existing insisted I continue. The loop obeyed him. The car obeyed the loop. I was the variable, the flaw, the one meant to break. I thought of the number. Negative range. Not miles left, miles undone. Travel measured toward zero. Or past it. The number wasn't fuel. It was countdown. A deficit. A debt. I don't understand, I whispered. The words broke apart as they left me, shredded by fear. The reply seeped through the cabin. Through engine hum. Through seat foam. Through me. Remember. The memory cracked me open. Years ago. Same interchange. A delivery shift. I'd parked here before dawn. Exhausted. Reclined the seat. Closed my eyes. Dreamed. Half asleep. That something had crawled from the shadows and watched me. From beyond the cloverleaf. From behind glass. I felt it then. Chilling. Wrong. But too afraid to confirm. I'd started the car, driven away, patted the dash like it was a charm. Later I laughed it off. Coffee and jokes with coworkers. Called it a hallucination. A napmare. But the interchange remembered. It had incubated what I left behind. Let it gestate. And now that fear had a face. The passenger was the debt collector. The embodiment of my cowardice. A toll I never paid. My throat clenched. I whispered not an apology, but a recognition. For trespassing. For ignoring. For refusing to see. Heat bloomed across my cheeks. Embarrassment. Reverence. Guilt. The cabin remained frigid. But something shifted inside me. Fingers slackened. For the first time, I lifted my foot from the accelerator. Voluntarily. The engine rolled forward a few feet, then faded to idle. I guided the car to a slow crawl along the shoulder. It came to rest beside a crumbling Jersey barrier. Silence settled. Then another. Layered. Final. Unbroken. The dashboard still glowed 300 through 3 kilometers. But the light no longer felt accusatory, only factual. I waited for the engine to stall, for the key to resist, for the cabin to collapse inward. Nothing happened. The car idled. A steady hum threading up through the floorboards. The stink of pond water had vanished, replaced by the dull, familiar scent of vinyl and stale coffee from my travel mug. I turned, half expecting a void or some terrible visage. But the back seat showed only a depression in the fabric, darkened by absorbed moisture. No figure. I reached out with a shaking hand. The seat sprang back, flattening the evidence. Wind tore past overhead, the storm's voice returning, rattling the rusted guard rails. In the distance, a pair of headlights swept the overpass like a slow, searching lighthouse beam, proof that somewhere, traffic still moved in straight lines. I faced forward again, my heart still pounding but at a human rhythm now, measurable, mortal. The odometer flickered, digits cycling before freezing into a strange, nonsensical readout. Ryrie 3K'er. Some logical remainder of whatever had passed. Then the GPS blinked back to life, its grid crawling into focus like dawn. The path home traced itself in a slow blue thread. I pulled back onto the ramp. The interchange still looked broken, blasted, but the road stretched outward this time, offering exit lanes like open hands. In the mirror, the back seat appeared as it should, blank, unoccupied. Rain streaking down the window, my headrest a dim silhouette. I emerged onto the highway. The speed felt safe. Wipers ticked out a rhythm I'd known for years. And yet, with every mile, something grew behind the noise. A question. Maybe several. Had I met its condition? Or just negotiated a delay? My shoulders ached from clenching. The cold in the car lingered, outlining a passenger-shaped absence, invisible but still present. At the city limits, neon spilled across the wet asphalt. The fuel gauge ticked down as expected, but now and then, when I glanced sideways at the mirror, my mind overlaid the number 303 across the display. Not a distance, a warning, an IOU written in fear, not petrol. Redeemable on any night I dare forget what waits between bridges and broken cloverleafs. I pulled into my driveway just before dawn. The engine ticked as it cooled. The rain had stopped. I sat there a while, reluctant to kill the headlights, afraid of letting the interior fall to darkness. When I finally turned off the ignition, the gauges trembled, then stilled. I told myself the tank was 3/4 full. But somewhere deep behind the plastic, beyond the wires, I imagined a hollow space where numbers could still run backward, tracking some silent debt in reverse kilometers, waiting for its next chance to collect. Sleep came in broken patches that day, jagged with images of looping highways, mirrors filled with absence, and faces under hoods that blurred even in memory. Each time I woke with my heart racing, I touched the floor beside my bed, just to feel that it remained still. I keep driving. The bills leave no choice. But whenever a ride request pings from across the river, sweat gathers at my scalp and I swipe decline. Because maybe it's still out there, indifferent to time, waiting under dead lamps for the driver who owes a fare not measured in distance, but in lack. And one night, when I'm too tired or too broke, I might accept again. Until then, every bridge echoes with its promise. Every mirror is a chance for absence. And every engine's tremble is a reminder that horror isn't always what rides behind you. Sometimes it's what rides with you, in the miles you thought you'd already left behind. I set the guitar down and pressed my ear to the brick. Cold grit kissed my skin. The melody flickered, distant, then clearer, almost close enough to touch. I traced the mortar lines and found a hairline seam I'd never noticed before. A narrow rectangle the size of a vent panel. The loft had once been a print shop, hastily retrofitted by a landlord fond of shortcuts. Hidden spaces weren't exactly unlikely. I pulled a flathead screwdriver from my amp kit, wedged it into the seam, and twisted. Mortar dust coughed out as the panel clicked and shifted inward. A shiver ran through me. Part thrill, part dread. Behind the brick yawned pitch darkness, carrying a smell like rosin and cold iron. I raised my phone. Its light reached only a few yards down a narrow corridor paneled in warped, splintered wood. Hooks lined the walls, and from each hook hung an instrument. Violins stripped of strings, cellos with hollow throats, banjos missing bridges, mandolins flayed down to naked fretboards. Yet as I stared, a whisper of sound stirred, notes ghosting from those mutilated bodies as if nerves still fired in dead limbs. I should have slammed the panel shut. Should have called the landlord, packed my gear. Instead, I stepped through. Curiosity can feel like a hook behind the breastbone, tugging you forward even as reason claws at your heels. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the air changed. The loft's bulb buzzed once behind me and died. My phone signal vanished. The screen glitched to static. Then the flashlight snapped off. Only the corridor's faint phosphorescence remained, pale motes drifting like dust on moonlit water. Each breath tasted of varnish and mildew. I moved slowly. The instruments welcomed me with shivers of sound. A violin scraped a G that vibrated in my sternum. A gutted cello thumped a low C that rattled my ribs. With each note, pressure built behind my ears. Like diving too deep, too fast. I swallowed, trying to equalize, but the ringing grew. A thin, persistent intrusion. Panic hovered, but fascination drowned it. I passed guitars stripped to bare necks, their missing strings thrumming as if plucked by unseen hands. The corridor stretched endlessly. No doors, no junctions, no stairs. Only that single path and its choir of amputated instruments. Minutes or hours blurred together. Time bent beneath the weight of uneasy harmonies. Sweat soaked my shirt. My pulse thudded loud in my throat. Every few steps, another sliver of hearing peeled away. High frequencies dulled first. The hiss of breath, the whisper of shoes on warped planks. Then the lower registers followed. Sweat slid past my ear, but I heard no splash when it struck the floor. I tried to speak, just a test. A shaky hello came out muffled, distant, as if shouted through wool. Above the persistent ringing stretched a silence so hollow it felt carnivorous. Then the corridor widened into a rotunda the size of a chapel, windowless, roofed in beams that wept black tar shadows. At its center stood a music stand carved from ebony, empty save for a single sheet of vellum, yellowed with age. The instruments from the corridor now lined the walls, hundreds of them, all stringless, all split open like ribs without lungs. Yet they breathed music threaded from them in synchronized whispers, winding around me, palpating my bones, squeezing tiny bursts of hearing from inside my skull. Behind the stand hung a tall mirror, its silver backing tarnished to a bruised gray. My reflection wavered, as if viewed underwater. Across the glass, musical staves flickered, notes inked in some ghostly hand, shifting like birds startled from wire to wire. The orchestra fell silent. The sudden hush hit with such force I staggered. In that vacuum, I felt it. A presence, patient and watchful, perched just beyond sight. My skin prickled. The hairs on my arms stood stiff. The mirror clouded, then cleared, no figure, only me. But something watched. And within that gaze was a command. Compose. It didn't speak in words. It pressed into the folds of my mind like a thumb behind the ear. The vellum on the stand fluttered though no wind moved. My tinnitus screamed, a banshee keen, then dropped out entirely, leaving a pure, terrible silence. Terror ignited, clean and sharp. If the music kept feeding, I'd go deaf, sealed in this coffin of echoes forever. I gripped the stand, my knuckles whitening. Behind me, a violin's frame groaned. Impatient, I understood the bargain. Write a piece worthy of the maestro, this unseen conductor cloaked in absence, or lose what remained of my hearing. My phone lay dead in my pocket, but my memory buzzed with fragments. Riffs, progressions, songs half-born in notebooks. I forced breath through my lungs, slow and measured, though every part of me wanted to flee. The vellum waited, blank. I had no ink, so I tapped rhythms on the wood, fingers trembling, sculpting sound in silence, carving my offering note by note in the air. A motif emerged, descending minor thirds, echo of the bandana that had lured me here. Underneath a pedal tone, a sustained low, E that throbbed like heartblood. I layered harmonics above, voices climbing, out of dissonance toward a fragile resolution before slipping again into shadow. The instrument stirred. Mutilated viola emitted a cautious interval, matching my imagined line. Encouraged, I shaped a bridge, an uneasy waltz where time signatures bent like warped glass. Sweat rolled down my jaw. My legs quaked from hours of tension. Yet I pressed on, charting a final movement. Single rising scale that refused to resolve, suspending in perpetual hunger. The mirror brightened, the tarnish burning off in drifting flakes. My reflection sharpened, lips moving though. No sound reached me. Along the glass, the notation I'd built in thought etched, itself stave by stave, ink bleeding like veins. The unseen maestro read, arching. Behind me, the orchestra answered. Stringless violins sawed air. Banjos rattled phantom rolls. Mandolins shimmered like orbiting insects. The rotunda pulsed. Vibrations threatened to liquefy my organs. Yet this time the sound fed me rather than devouring. Frequencies returned, rushing back in a tidal roar. I heard the rattled pump of my own heart, the ragged rasp of breath, the distant city outside the loft walls. I could no longer see. A final chord crashed, a hollow perfect fifth that cracked the mirror down its center. Glass split, peeling apart like stage curtains. Beyond lay the loft exactly as I'd left it. Single bulb flickering, guitar waiting, night pressing against dusty windows. I stepped through. With each pace, the corridor behind shrank, its walls folding into themselves like extinguished bellows. The panel sealed shut without a sound. The bulb steadied, glowing calm. Outside, distant traffic hissed. Normal, everyday life reasserted itself, but hung uneasy, as though I'd returned to a replica rather than the original world. Lifted my guitar, struck a chord. The G resonated true, but a ghost harmony lingered beneath. Subaudible, felt more than heard. The ringing in my ears subsided, yet a pale hush remained, as if part of my span of frequencies belonged elsewhere now. I slept poorly that night, dreams full of corridors that flexed and breathed. In the morning, I searched the wall for seams, but mortar met brick and unbroken lines. No hidden latch, no draft, nothing but cool, stubborn masonry. Gigs came. My playing had changed subtle, but audiences leaned in, brows furrowed, like sensing a current of sound just beyond human range. Reviews called it haunting, otherworldly. I would finish a set to applause that dwindled into mild unease, listeners rubbing ears as if uncertain of what they'd truly heard. Sometimes, when the crowd settled, I caught a ribbon of distant banjo, weaving through the final chord, teasing from within the stage walls. Its melody, bent in minor thirds, approving, reminding me that the maestro still listened, always one note away. When that happens, a tremor crawls under my ribs, and I wonder what price comes with every encore. I sat. Vinyl squeaked beneath me. Air tasted of burnt coffee and something sweet, like syrup left too long on a stove. My palms sweated. The owner slid a laminated menu my way, but my gaze latched onto the single line typed beneath the grim list of burgers and pies. How special. Asked to receive. Nerves crawled along my spine. The fluorescent buzz above grew louder, almost insect-like, drilling into my skull. When the man finally spoke, his voice came cold and even, more a recitation than a conversation. Say grace in your heart, and the plate will know you. Then he turned and vanished into the back. My throat tightened. I looked around again. Still empty. Still wrong. I felt my pulse hammer. Chest tight. I should have left. But hunger clawed inside me. A hollow ache from driving too many miles on caffeine. Minutes later, the owner returned, setting a shallow pewter dish before me. Its contents resembled creamy chowder, yet the surface shimmered like oil over water, colors sliding from pale ivory to murky violet. Steam rose, thin and lilac-tinted, curling toward the buzzing lights. I swallowed dry air and lowered my head in a silent reflex of prayer, habit drilled in by a strict childhood. The second the unspoken words crossed my mind, the surface of the chowder rippled. Tendrils of color spiraled inward, knitting into new textures, soft lumps hardening into crunchy ridges, then melting back before I could focus. A tremor shook my fingers. Still, I lifted a spoon. The first mouthful felt warm, savory, strangely comforting. Something earthy and nostalgic unfolded on my tongue. Grandmother's chicken, the cinnamon of Christmas breakfasts, the cold iron bite of my first nosebleed on a schoolyard. Flavor shifted faster than I could name it. I breathed out, and a faint purple mist hissed past my lips, vanishing before my eyes. A weightless gap opened in my thoughts. A detail I'd known a heartbeat earlier slid away, slippery as wet soap. I frowned, spoon hovering. What had I just remembered? A song? A face? Gone. Heartbeat spiked. Sweat prickled along my hairline. The owner watched, head tilted, expression blank. He tapped the counter once. Heavy knuckles on laminate. The meaning was clear. Keep eating. Fear made my stomach knot, but curiosity dug deeper. I took another spoonful. Memories fluttered like moths hitting a bulb. Campfire smoke. A first kiss behind a bleacher's wall. My college dorm room stuffed with vinyl records. Vapor drifted from my nostrils and lips, twirling lavender ribbons that vanished into the dim. Each exhale left me lighter, but emptier too. I felt the loss in my chest, a hollow tug where warm recollection had lived. I forced the spoon down on the plate, metal clack echoing. Muscles trembled. Breath came shallow. The owner's voice slid over me. Soft, dry, inevitable. Our special absorbs secrets from those who chew. Finish and you will feel clean. His words sounded like they were spoken from deep inside the diner's bones, not from his throat. I stood too fast. Stool legs screeched. The room lurched sideways. Tables stretched long, then snapped back. My vision swam in violet haze. Panic flared. I tried to recall my license plate number, my mother's middle name, even the motel I'd checked out of that morning. Blank spaces all. Terror roared through veins, heart punching so hard my ribs hurt. I needed the recipe, some antidote, anything. The kitchen held answers. I stepped around the counter. The owner didn't try to stop me. He simply turned away, wiping the already clean metal with a frayed rag. His indifference felt worse than a threat. Fluorescent lights hummed louder as I pushed through a swinging door, into darkness smelling of wet stone and old herbs. Bare bulbs, spaced erratically along the ceiling, lit a corridor narrow enough that my shoulders brushed walls tiled in cracked jade. Each bulb flickered at a different rhythm, creating stuttering strobes that warped depth. My shadow jittered ahead like something broken. Grease lingered underfoot, thick as moss. Skin came away smeared faint violet. The owner's silhouette filled the doorway frame, haloed by sick amber from the dining room. He didn't step in. He only watched, head cocked as though measuring how much of me remained. I expected anger but saw something colder, curiosity. An understanding tremor shook me. He never stopped anyone from stealing the recipe. He wanted witnesses, carriers, vessels. I backed away, knocking the saucepan to the floor. Violet broth splashed across tiles, sizzling like acid. Memory shards glittered in the puddle. The owner spoke once, voice low, even, "Every cook needs tasters." The words slithered over my skin. Adrenaline seized me. I shoved past him, shoulder hitting his solid frame like pushing against a door that decides to open. He didn't resist. I burst into the dining room. Fluorescence blazed white now, humming like a nest of hornets. The dish on the counter had emptied itself, leaving only silver residue. Vapor still coiled from it, feeding overhead vents. My lungs tightened with chemical sweetness. I staggered to the exit. The bell above the door screamed as it clanged. Night air slapped my face cold and real. Tires screeched on gravel as I fumbled keys, engine roaring to life. I floored the gas. The diner receded in the rearview mirror, neon sign flickering from violet to dead black. For miles the desert road lay empty but for my headlights carving endless dark. Moments stretched, sweat dried on my skin leaving salt crust. Memories unraveled and rewove behind my eyes. My own mixed with others. I whispered my name aloud, grounding myself in the sound. Yet echoes inside repeated different names, foreign accents. Paranoia crawled. Was the road looping, were mountains shifting? I gripped the wheel until knuckles bleached. When dawn finally bled over the horizon, I pulled into a rest stop. Hands shook so badly I could hardly turn the key off. I studied my reflection in the dusty rearview. The face stared back familiar yet off, as though small details had been redrawn by someone who'd only read descriptions. Eyes looked older or younger, hard to tell. Inside my jacket pocket I found the torn ledger page. Ingredients smeared, instructions blurred by steam yet still legible. Proof the night happened. Proof I had stolen something that would never fully belong to me. A faint lilac glow stained the paper's edges, pulsing with each beat of my heart. I sit here now, writing these lines to anchor myself. I remember my brother's laughter, my mother's perfume, the diner's buzzing lights, the taste of secrets simmered in forbidden broth. I also remember kneeling by a lake I've never visited, burning letters I've never written. Both sets of memories feel equally real, threads knotted together. I don't know how long before the fragments shift again, before another person's guilt or desire swells louder than my own thoughts. Maybe the recipe can be tested, refined, reversed more cleanly. Or maybe the owner knew there was no way back once tasted, that the dish is a door you walk through in bites, leaving bits of yourself behind on the plate. The page in my hand pulses. My heart answers, fast and unsteady. Somewhere on the horizon, a strip of highway shimmers under rising heat. I could drive until fuel runs dry, trying to outrun borrowed memories bleeding into my mind. But roads loop like prayers whispered over chowder, and secrets always want new mouths to chew them. The sun climbs, turning violet edges of the page to dull gray. Yet when I breathe out, a thin lilac mist still curls from my lips before dissolving in the dawn air. I'm not sure whose memory just escaped. I only know it was part of me, whether original or acquired, and it's gone for good. Somewhere, a dusty diner waits with a flickering sign. Somewhere, a man in a stained coat practices recipes that erase and refill lives. And somewhere inside my own head, rooms of borrowed thoughts creak open, inviting me to explore or be consumed. I grip the wheel again, knuckles white, heartbeat rattling in my chest. The road stretches empty, silent, and far too familiar. Every few steps I glimpsed a faint lilac wisp curling up the corridor, drifting through seams in the tiles as though the diner itself breathed memories like smoke. I passed steel shelves packed with mason jars. Inside floated scraps of paper, photographs, lockets, ticket stubs, mementos suspended in cloudy liquid. When I edged closer, letters on the paper blurred into static, faces and photos dissolved to white shapes. Heat pulsed behind my eyes and I stepped back, heart tripping. Cold sweat rolled down my temple. At the corridor's dead end, a rusted door hung ajar. I nudged it. Hinges squealed, grinding like teeth. The kitchen beyond sat drowned in dim red emergency light. Ovens lined one wall. All were cold. The center held a battered oak table blanketed with parchments, butcher knives, and a stained ledger thick as a dictionary. The air felt denser here, sweet and rotten at once, making each breath stick. I flipped the ledger open. Handwriting slanted across brittle pages. Recipes etched in dark ink that shimmered purple under the red lamp. The lines read like invocations more than instructions. Spoonful of unspoken guilt. Half cup of forgotten promises. Simmer until silence thickens. Words swam on the page, refusing focus. My pulse thundered in my ears. I realized I was forgetting how I'd gotten here, why I needed the recipe, even what road I'd driven earlier. Desperation jolted me. Friction peeled along my teeth. I tasted copper. I forced myself to scan ingredients, searching for reversal phrases. One section bore a jagged header. To return the taste. Beneath it, 3 steps appeared, each harder to read than the last, letters drifting like smoke. My lips moved, sounding them out. Not prayers this time, but crude instructions. Boil the special with a shard of self-awareness. Stir counterclockwise with open eyes. Consume before steam cools. I needed a shard of myself, something tied to memory. Hand shaking, I patted pockets until fingers closed on my wallet. I pulled out a cracked Polaroid, me and my brother holding a busted guitar on our parents' porch. For an instant, his name hovered on my lips, then slid away like soap and water. I cursed under my breath, barely remembering the photo at all. But I tore off a corner and dropped it into a dented saucepan. I ladled a portion of the still warm chowder from a nearby pot, the surface already curling violet. The liquid hissed on contact with the photo crap, steam turning deeper purple, rising in urgent swirls. My head swam, thoughts slipped sideways, words looping back on themselves. I stirred with a wooden spoon, fighting vertigo. The recipe demanded open eyes. Eyelids trembled with exhaustion. As I stirred counterclockwise, shadows along the wall stretched, contorting into tall forms with no faces. They leaned closer, arms like thin branches. I told myself they were tricks of failing vision and the pulsing red bulb, but ice crawled my spine. Breath rasped, lungs stuttering. When the mixture thickened, I tipped the saucepan to my lips. Steam flooded my face, damp and burning. The first swallow scalded tongue and throat, yet cold flooded veins immediately after. A bizarre clash that made me gag. I forced another mouthful. Heart slamming, hands locked on the handle. A sharp jolt hit between my eyes, as though someone yanked a cable connected to every buried recollection. Images detonated behind my eyelids. My brother shouting lyrics into a cheap microphone. A birthday cake melting candles onto a porch table. The taste of chalk dust from grade school erasers. Names snapped back. Mom, Dad, Ben. Relief hammered through me so hard my knees buckled. I braced against the table, gasping. But new memories crowded in that weren't mine. A teenage girl scribbling secrets in diary margins. A stranger crying in a phone booth. An old man burning letters beside a lake. Random, vivid fragments jammed into my skull, overlapping my own past. I realized the chowder had returned what the diner had taken, but it had poured other people's secrets inside me too. My stomach flipped. Pressure built behind my eyes. I felt like a balloon overfilled with mismatched lives, ready to tear. I wiped sweat from my brow. Someone had filed a welfare inquiry. An anonymous note scrawled in shaky pen. Residents isolated. Possible abuse. Please send help. As the new social services liaison, I could have handed the case to someone else. But curiosity, and a still fresh sense of duty, dragged me out to the farm. The badge and clipboard in my hands felt like hollow symbols of authority. The porch sagged under my weight, the wood soft and damp. A crooked porch swing creaked gently. No wind, no reason. Each groan landing in my chest like a dropped coin. The front door stood half open. Inviting or warning? Hard to say. I called out, voice too loud in the stillness, then stepped inside heel first. The light, if you could call it that, was a murky soup of dust motes suspended in thick, unmoving air. Furniture sat in strange clusters. A sofa facing a wardrobe, a dining chair turned toward a vanity. Every surface gleamed. Not polished wood, no, actual mirrors, laminated over the furniture like reflective skins. Their shine distorted the room, multiplying it into warped reflections. And in those reflections, I kept catching flickers. A shoulder, a hand, a face that didn't match mine. But every time I turned, the room was empty. My heart kicked up. Sweat pooled at my spine. Maybe squatters? Or some eccentric with a mirror obsession. But each breath tasted less like reason. I stepped further. The silence seemed to hold its breath. A murmur brushed my ear. No source. No breeze. Trade flesh. Keep the shine. I froze. Beneath my boots, the floor vibrated. A low hum I didn't hear so much as feel, like a throat clearing beneath the boards. Another whisper, this one from the dresser. The wood spoke. One step. One sliver. We bargain. The clipboard trembled in my hand. Sweat slicked the paper edges. I forced myself to go through the motions. Inspect, document, verify occupancy. Finish the job. Leave. But with every step, new voices joined in. A chorus of tones, some pleading, some coaxing, some laced with hunger. They all said the same thing. A swap. My physical body for the echo I left in the mirrors. Absurd. But the idea burrowed into me like a splinter. In the kitchen, mirrored panels lined the cabinets. I felt like I was inside a bug's compound eye. Shadows gathered in the corners of the reflections. The longer I stared, the clearer they became. Silhouettes behind me. None looked at me. They watched something just over my shoulder, like I was standing in someone else's scene. When I turned, the room was always empty. Still, the hair on my arms lifted. I tried calling out again. A calm, professional tone, but it came out thin and uneven, warped by fear. The murmurs responded, clustering closer. Give us the shell. Keep the echo. I backed into the hallway, looking for the back door. The floorboards alternated, with slats and mirrored strips. Every time my foot hit one of the mirrors, the surface rippled like water. Another whisper escaped. My vision doubled. Vertigo reeled in my skull. Was each step peeling something off me? My soul? My link to reality? Panic surged. My ribs tightened. Couldn't breathe. I needed sky, daylight, anything normal. The back door stuck but finally gave way under my shove, opening onto a yard overgrown with tall ryegrass. Beyond the weeds stood a sagging barn, roof rusted to a dull red. I stumbled toward it. The ground clutched at my boots. My balance was shot. The air smelled of wet earth and electricity, like a battery left in the rain. Inside it was dim. Blessedly, there were no mirrors. Dusty sunlight trickled through the slats. Along one wall, stacked plastic tubes, emergency lanterns with yellow tags. Evacuation use. I flicked one on. The light buzzed to life in a harsh, steady beam. The hum was still there, softer now, but the light felt like a shield. For now. I tested one lantern, then another, until I held 3 beams of harsh white light. Their combined glow painted the barn in solid, defined shapes where shadows had reigned. A fragile veneer of safety. But safety, I reminded myself, was relative. From the farmhouse doorway, the voices returned. Not scattered whispers now, but one coalesced utterance. A single, unified voice. Bring us out. Carry the bargain. The sound wasn't airborne. Pulsed through my bones, syncing with my heartbeat. My mouth went dry. A tremor ran through my grip on the lanterns. Still, I sensed leverage. They wanted something they couldn't do alone. They needed me, needed help crossing some threshold, literal or not. Maybe if I guided them out, they'd let go. Or maybe they'd claim me outside instead of in. The thought tasted metallic, like biting foil. But standing still meant surrendering to panic. Action, however desperate, felt slightly better. I strapped 2 lanterns over my shoulders using old rope from a pegboard. Their beams fanned out, one forward, one behind. I clutched the third in my hand like a torch. Its glow stabbed into the farmhouse gloom as I stepped back inside. The reflective boards recoiled under the flood of light. Silver surfaces boiled and warped as though heated. The whispers thinned into faint gasps. I advanced steadily, sweeping the beam left and right. Each time the light struck a mirror, the lurking shadows retreated, dissolving into static that skittered down the surface like grease. The voices hissed protests. Not that way. Turn the light away. I ignored them. My heart pounded so violently it blurred my vision. Sweat slicked my back, soaking my shirt. The house seemed to lean inward with every step, like it wanted me to stay. Room to hall, hall to foyer. I placed the lanterns in intervals, creating islands of harsh, sterile glow. Wherever the light touched, the mirrored skirting boards writhed. The figures began funneling toward the open front door, inch by inch, like oil draining away from flame. Their tone shifted, negotiation gave way to desperation. Then to warning. Your reflection already glimmers in our glass. You are half here. Finish the trade. A trickle of dread slid down my spine. I glanced at a nearby sideboard mirror not yet lit. My reflection stood inside it, slightly off, slightly wrong. Its eyes were hollow, dull sockets leaking light. The skin looked faded, overexposed, like something from a decaying photo. I recoiled, choking on my breath. My knees threatened to buckle. Focus, get to the door. Outside, dusk had settled, painting the yard in violet-gray haze. I stepped onto the porch and set the last lantern at the threshold, its beam facing inward like a lighthouse aimed at the dark. Behind me, the mirrors closest to the door convulsed. Something pressed from the inside, bulging against the laminate. A low, resonant growl vibrated through the house's frame. Resistance. Rage. Then they burst. Not bodies. Not ghosts. Shimmers. Streaks of reflective matter like mercury, poured too fast. They rushed along the beams of light, down the floorboards, over the porch steps, into open air. As they crossed into dusk, the shapes unraveled, losing form, scattering into glints that rose like silver fireflies. One by one, they winked out. The voices faded with them, shrinking to a faint rustle, then gone. Silence returned. Thick, complete. I collapsed onto the porch rail, muscles shuddering with the release. My breath caught on leftover fear. Night insects chirped again, cautious, tentative. I turned to glance through the doorway. The mirrors showed only what was real now. Abandoned rooms, empty space. No figures, no faces, just light. Relief swelled briefly, but something gnawed at the edge of it. I stepped back inside, picked up the lantern from the threshold. Some stubborn part of me needed to be sure. I turned the light toward the hallway's mirrored floor. Still now, calm. But as I stepped forward, I felt it. No reflection. My boots made contact, but I cast no shape in the mirror-smooth slats. No color, no silhouette. The glass showed only ceiling rafters and cobwebs. Nothing of me. A chill sliced through my chest, deeper than before, as though the night air had funneled into my marrow. I stumbled back outside, clutching the lantern like a blade. The sky had gone fully dark. No stars, no moon, just a horizon smeared in charcoal over fallow fields. I raised the lantern, pointed it at my own face. The light hit me warm, tangible. But in the barn's metal siding? Nothing. Only empty sky. Rippling over rusted steel, the trade had concluded after all. They left, yes, but took something intangible. An image, a duplicate skin I'd never know was missing until I searched for it. I was intact in every practical sense. Heartbeat strong, lungs working, sweat drying in the cooling air. Yet part of me, no longer tethered to light, would never reappear. I backed toward my car, shoes crunching gravel loud enough to confirm physical presence. Each breath steamed visible in the headlamp glow. The farmhouse loomed behind, silent and inert, but its pitch-dark windows gleamed faintly like distant mirrors catching unknown stars. I drove away without looking back again, afraid some remnant reflection might be following, sliding across surfaces to reclaim the rest of me. And now, days later, every time I pass a storefront window or angle past a bathroom mirror, I brace for absence. Sometimes I see myself solid, normal, undeniable. Sometimes the glass stares blankly, reflecting only the world behind me. In those moments, a hush brushes my ear like breath on glass. I strain to hear whether it bargains anew, but the words remain indistinct, hovering just outside understanding, waiting for the right light to speak. 7. The first thing that warned me we had left familiar territory was the silence. Tires whispered over cracked asphalt, and the usual night chirp of insects seemed smothered by a thick, invisible blanket. My girlfriend Mara dozed against the passenger window, strands of hair plastered to the glass by the humid breath of a summer storm that refused to break. Headlights slashed through a narrow curve carved into the hillside, an elbow of road with sheer forest on one side and a drop into reeds on the other. For a heartbeat, my chest tightened, sensing I had driven straight into a pocket of air that did not belong to any map. When the beam caught shifting shapes ahead, I braked hard. The engine's growl fractured the quiet, then died into an anxious idle, for figures blocked the lane. They wore antique carnival masks, cracked porcelain, fading paint, metallic filigree dulled by years. Each mask held a frozen grin too wide for a human mouth. Their clothes were plain black coats, hems brushing the asphalt as though they floated. I felt my pulse hammer behind my ears, the drum of blood outpacing the wiper blades. Mara startled awake, asking in a half-dream what was wrong. I muttered that we weren't alone. She followed my gaze and stiffened, hands flattening on the dash. Instinct told me to reverse, yet every muscle locked. The figures did not raise weapons or demand wallets. Instead, two stepped aside while the other pair advanced, arms extended. In gloved hands, they carried hourglasses the length of a forearm, glass swollen at the center like a lung mid-inhale. Fine silver sand churned within. But the hourglasses rotated on their own axes, spinning with the lazy certainty of planets. No human fingers directed them. I rolled down my window only an inch. The lead figure inclined his mask, the gesture polite, almost courtly, and presented the hourglass through the gap. Its glass face caught my headlight and flashed an image that was not a reflection. Inside the swirling particles appeared Mara and me, still seated in this very car, yet overrun by ivy, windshields coated in moss. We were frozen, mouths parted as though speaking but unmoving. Trees behind us had grown thick enough to strangle the road. The scene vanished as the sand tumbled. My throat dried to paper. Mara whispered that the other masked stranger held a twin device, sand painting a similar vision. Our silhouettes pacing the shoulder endlessly, clutching each other, unable to step off the curve. The figures offered the objects like gifts. No menace in their posture, yet all menace in their stillness. A damp breeze carried the faint rattle of glass tapping gloves. I tried to reason aloud. Maybe they were performers, pranksters. My words tasted thin. The leader tilted his head again, urging me to take the hourglass. I imagined refusing, flooring the gas, but my foot might as well have fused to the mat. The wheel felt welded in place. The car, the curve, and the night had collapsed into a single pocket where only one decision could be made. I reached through the gap. The glass chilled my palm with a breath colder than weather. The hourglass ceased spinning the instant I gripped it, and the sand stilled at midpoint, suspended. The leader stepped back. A humming rose in my inner ear like voltage traveling marrow. I asked what they wanted. My voice trembled. The reply never came in speech. I could record it, but instead awareness seeped quietly into my thoughts. An intrusive narrator whispering terms I couldn't escape. Trade us an hour of your present and you may drive on. Refuse and you repeat the bend forever. Time coiled back on itself in endless loops until surrender. Acceptance meant escape, yet the cost was the anchor of now. Memories would smear, moments bleed together, and the future slip loose. I stared at Mara. Panic quivered in her pupils, reflecting the dim flare of taillights. She reached out and touched the hourglass. The sand inside glimmered violet, revealing a fresh tableau. Our car rolled beyond the curve beneath a crescent dawn, but our faces were vague, eyes unfocused, as though names and dates had dissolved into dust. A choice woven in grains of sand. My heartbeat thudded so hard my ribs ached. Sweat trickled down my spine, cold despite the vaporous heat. I heard night animals again, but their sounds warped, echoing from strange, impossible angles. The masked quartet remained statues, waiting. We had spoken perhaps 20 words, but dialogue felt too loud, too solid against the fragile quiet. Mara's breathing quickened, short, shallow bursts. I thought about turning off the ignition and running, but the curve was narrow and the rusted railings fragile. Besides, the unseen narrator reminded me distance meant nothing when the clock loops. I squeezed the hourglass tightly. Fine cracks spidered across its surface, not breaking but mapping new lines. The sand slid to the lower bulb, and with it fell an hour I would never perceive. A chill tunneled through my veins, rearranging my recollections. I remembered the first kilometers of tonight's drive with cinematic clarity, but moments after accepting the trade, that memory faded like smoke, leaving only a wistful outline. Mara gasped. She had felt it too, grabbing her temples. The masks dipped in synchronous approval. Two figures stepped aside, clearing the lane. The leader tipped an unseen hat and withdrew into shadow, glass crunching faintly under their shoes, though no shards had fallen. I turned the key. The engine responded, but its growl sounded distant, as though I listened from inside a tunnel. We rolled forward. Tires crossed the spot where they had stood. Not a scuff remained. My chest loosened with false relief until I noticed the dashboard clock skipping erratically. 1:14 a.m. flickered to 1:44, then back to 1:29. The radio screen glitched between songs that never finished. I clenched the wheel, knuckles blanching. Mara asked if we should pull over somewhere lit. Her words slurred at their ends, as though tapes sped up then slowed. I answered uncertainly, unsure if my speech had even arrived intact. Outside, the air thickened. High beams illuminated mist spiraling upward like breath from hidden mouths. Another kilometer passed, or maybe the same, before realization struck. Road signs repeated. A bent mile marker, a spray-painted guardrail scar. My peripheral vision caught the broken branch I had noticed earlier. We had moved, yet place refused to change. Anxiety crawled up my throat. I pressed the pedal harder. Trees blurred, but the curve looped back into view, headlights carving the identical elbow. The hourglass on Mara's lap rattled despite standing upright. Sand jittered, revealing flashes of our car spinning in place, us banging on windows, chronology unspooling like ribbon. My temples pounded. Breath came ragged. A metallic taste flooded my mouth. Fear was so sharp I thought I might bite through my tongue. I slammed the brakes. Gravel spat. We skidded to the shoulder, where frogs croaked out of sync with their own echoes. I grabbed the hourglass, tempted to hurl it into the ravine. The glass was warm now, pulsing like a heartbeat. The sand reversed direction on its own, crawling upward. With each grain, my senses warped. The forest tilted. Stars smeared across the sky as if wet paint dragged by invisible fingers. Mara clutched my arm, nails digging in, eyes wide but unfocused. She couldn't recall the exit we took onto this highway or the gas station coffee earlier. Pieces of the evening were dissolving. I forced myself to concentrate on tactile anchors, the steering wheel's leather pattern beneath sweaty palms. The seat seemed pressing my thigh, the faint vibration of the engine. Present, I told myself. Remain in the present. But the present had become too slippery. Above the treeline, a low hum rose, converging with the inner ear throb that began when I first touched the glass. I glimpsed for an instant faint lantern glows deeper among the trunks, the masked figures pacing parallel, shepherding our loop. A revelation hit like cold water. We had accepted only one hourglass. Mara and I as a pair, but two had been offered. The trade incomplete left the loop unstable, halfway collapsed. The forest, the curve, time itself frayed like rope under strain. To escape completely, we might need the second device or break the bargain altogether. Mara murmured she could still see it behind her closed eyelids. Another hourglass hanging in darkness, its sand suspended, waiting. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped mine, sweat chilling her skin. I imagined turning back, searching the shoulder for the masked quartet. But instinct warned me they only appeared when it suited them, not when summoned. Lightning flickered without thunder, briefly revealing their masks among the trees. Each face stared through gaps in the leaves, holding no hourglasses now. Instead, one slowly pointed a finger toward the curb ahead, as if reminding us of the path. I breathed through burning lungs and shifted into drive. The car rolled forward, gravel groaning beneath the tires. The curve approached again. Adrenaline surged, sending tingling static from scalp to fingertips. This time, as we entered the bend, I eased off the gas and closed my eyes for half a second, focusing solely on the sensation of forward motion. When I opened them, the road ahead had split. A narrow, cobbled slip road I hadn't noticed before. Mara saw it too, tears shining as she nodded. We veered onto the spur. Instantly, the humming dulled. The masked figures receded, swallowed by shadows. The dashboard clock froze at 2:02 a.m. before powering off. Only the engine's raw noise remained. Relief fluttered in my chest, but the memory of the masked bargain slipped away like water on glass. I knew we'd given something, though what exactly escaped me. Minutes or kilometers later, we emerged onto a straight highway bathed in violet dawn. The sky glowed unnaturally bright, but my watch insisted it was still night. Mara whispered her own name felt strange, syllables detached from meaning. I felt the same dislocation. My voice echoed in my skull with a stranger's timbre. We drove until a service station appeared, its lights humming softly. Inside, patrons sipped coffee and flipped newspapers with unreadable dates. Letters rearranged themselves, refusing to settle. With cold certainty, I realized that although we'd moved beyond the curve, our sense of the present had fractured. Memories formed only to blur again, like pencil lines erased before the ink dried. Outside, the hourglass lay upside down on the dashboard, its sand frozen at the midpoint, balanced between past and future, never emptying. The cost of moving forward had been the anchor of continuity itself. We could travel any road, but the present would always slip away, time experienced like flickering film frames out of order. As we pulled away, a radio ad crackled, promising endless summer nights. The irony stung. In the rearview mirror, I saw no masked figures or twisted forest. But sometimes, at the edges of my vision, porcelain smiles glimmered among the trees, silently counting grains of sand that would never settle. Now I tell this while I still remember the curve in full. By the time I finish, half the drive will have smudged, details running like wet ink. I cling to the remaining fragments, the chill of glass, the roar of panicked blood, the way the sand painted our captivity. I don't know if we escaped or merely traded one loop for another, stretched across every road we take. Yet the hourglass stays silent, balanced, daring me to watch long enough to see which bulb holds the future, and which quietly devours the present we have already forgotten. The first flash of light hit my rearview mirror like a silent siren. A dense strip of highway cut through the flatlands, black as a shut-eye after midnight, but that rusty 18-wheeler behind me glowed with a radioactive brightness. My hands clenched the steering wheel. Sweat prickled my shoulders, even though the air conditioning still spat out cool air. I wasn't speeding, yet my pulse thrashed as if I'd sprinted 100 yards. Another pulse, a long, then short Morse code. My brain dredged up half-forgotten scout lessons. Headlights as signals. My sedan's cabin filled with harsh white glare. Each burst burned the rig's silhouette into my retinas. Cracked grille, dented bumper. Paint the color of dried blood beneath a layer of dust. Every flash felt deliberate, measured, intentional. For the first hour, I shrugged it off as a bored trucker entertaining himself. But by the second hour, the signals formed patterns too precise to ignore. The asphalt stretched ahead, an endless night. I tapped the rhythm on the steering wheel, dread growing as I translated the coded message. They demanded coordinates, northings and eastings, numbers that twisted into shapes refusing to fit any grid on my phone's map. The latitude seemed plausible, but the longitude stretched beyond the edge of the globe, an impossible place. The radio was dead static. Switching bands yielded only a hiss, like breath caught in metal teeth. My gas gauge crept toward empty. I tasted copper on my tongue, nerves flooding my mouth with a metallic tang. Dylan, dozing in the passenger seat, stirred and muttered maybe we should pull over and let the rig pass. I told him flatly that the driver could have overtaken 100 times already. This wasn't about traffic. This was a message. Dylan frowned but slumped back, headphones on, unaware that every mile peeled another layer off my sanity. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The engine whined. The truck stayed an arm's length behind, perfectly matching my speed. Its beams never missed a beat in their cryptic dit pulse. My spine buzzed. Every glance in the mirror felt like staring down a tunnel lit by surgical lamps. Road signs blurred past. Then suddenly they didn't. Exits vanished. Mile markers replaced by blank posts leaning like broken fingers. Only one sign remained. A cracked board reading, "Last stop to my," nothing more. No brand logo, no gas icon. Just the warning. My gas light winked orange. When the station appeared, it looked fossilized in time. One crooked canopy, two ancient pumps, an office with no lights, no other cars, no distant glow of houses. I swerved in, tires crunching over gravel. The truck rolled behind me and parked on the opposite island. Its engine idled so low it sounded subterranean. Then the headlights shut off. Darkness swallowed us both, except for the flickering sodium lamp above my pump, humming like an insect trapped behind glass. I stepped out. The night air was thick, syrupy with diesel fumes and something sweeter, rotting. Every hair on my arms stood at attention. The pump's digital display was dead. I yanked the handle anyway. Nothing. I slammed it back. Across the lot, the rig rumbled. A sound deeper than thunder, and its headlights flashed once. Long, short, short. My chest constricted. Then the digits on my pump flared to life in neon green. They scrolled letters instead of numbers. MICHAELHAWKINS. My full name, impossible and obscene, on a gas station display. I jerked back, heart hammering in my throat. Sweat slid down my spine, soaking my shirt. The display wiped clean, then rewrote. FULYN. I swallowed, tasting rust. The rig's engine revved. My skin tingled as memory flickered. An image of my mother's face at a birthday I suddenly could not place, year, age gone. Panic tightened around my ribs. The pump wrote again. NEXTMILE. 1MEMORY. Behind the cracked glass of the office, a single fluorescent tube sputtered to life, then died. I imagined shapes moving between shadows, watching. The world felt paper-thin, ready to tear. The pump now offered two options, alternating in jittery letters. ASYECODIESE. RUNDRY. Dylan called from the car, voice muffled, asking why my name was on the pump. I couldn't answer. My throat felt packed with sand, breath ragged, chest hitching. If I drove off, I'd lose memories 1 kilometer at a time. The pump promised this with a logic colder than any threat. If I fueled with whatever eco-diesel it offered, I might anchor myself to coordinates that shouldn't exist. A distant insect scream sliced through the air. No tires on asphalt. I spun. The truck was moving, creeping, slowly closing in. The narrator's journey plunges into a surreal nightmare as they circle a desolate lot shrouded in darkness, lit only by the faint, pulsing red glow of tail lights that resemble beating arteries. This unsettling image sets the tone for a scene brimming with dread and unnatural life, as the gravel shifts beneath their vehicle with a sound evocative of bones grinding. The narrator smells an odd combination of scorched rubber and old hay, an odor incongruous with the tractor-trailer nearby, hinting at something unnatural about the environment. They approach the fuel pump, gripping the nozzle and pressing a lone green button faintly illuminated beneath the eco label. The hose shudders violently, dispensing a liquid thicker than regular diesel, described with onomatopoeic glug-glug sounds. The smell intensifies. Sharp, chemical, mingled with pine and ozone, causing the narrator's stomach to churn. Their name vanishes from the pump's display, replaced by a set of coordinates. Impossible, repeating like a mantra, and the fueling completes precisely at 1313, despite the fuel tank being nearly empty. This exact timing and the repetitive coordinates suggest a supernatural or otherworldly force at work, imposing strange rules on this space. As the narrator replaces the nozzle, their pulse drums in their temples, heightened by the presence of Dylan, who steps out and recoils at the viscous green residue on the fuel filler neck. Dylan questions the safety of this fuel, but the narrator insists they have no choice, voice cracking with the weight of forced acceptance. Dylan shivers and retreats back into the car. The engine rumbles to life and they attempt to exit. But the truck, ominous and hulking, halts in front of them, blocking the driveway by mere inches. Its headlights flash in a strobing pattern, spelling out GO in Morse code, a cryptic message that causes the narrator's breath to hitch and sweat to sting their eyes. Pushing forward, the truck backs away just enough to allow passage, and the highway reabsorbs them. From here, reality starts to dissolve. The odometer recalibrates erratically, digits sliding into nonsense before counting backwards, a terrifying symbol of time unraveling or reversing. The narrator feels a thread snap behind their eyes, their mind fragmenting as memories begin to flutter away. Childhood summers, first job, graduation. The world outside the guardrails appears smeared, as if painted carelessly, distorting normal perception. Road lanes multiply, then funnel into a single, dead-end strip not mapped anywhere. Radio static shifts, forming patterns that mirror the truck's light code. An invasive, cerebral symphony playing directly into the narrator's skull. Dylan points forward in alarm, but the narrator hears his words from behind, delayed and distorted. The narrator's chest burns, and breathing feels like inhaling through gauze soaked in ice water, a visceral metaphor for suffocation and panic. They recognize the danger. Stopping would mean forgetting the function of brakes, the loss of agency and control. So they push onward, the car shaking violently. Suddenly, the coordinates manifest physically as a colossal sign arching over the road, digits glowing with the same sickly green as the eco-fuel. Passing beneath the archway causes every high school memory to drain away like cold water, leaving behind hollow placeholders. The narrator clenches the steering wheel until their tendons scream, a sign of desperate resistance. Ahead lies a vast concrete circle bathed in floodlights that float on poles with no visible cords, a surreal and sterile amphitheater. At its center is a spiral of parking bays, each occupied by a copy of the narrator's car, different colors, license plates from various decades, but unmistakably identical in make, model, and engine, all idling in eerie unison. The narrator tastes bile and their stomach heaves. Dylan whispers that he has seen this place before in a dream he can no longer fully remember. Tears shimmer in his eyes, the emotional weight of the scene overwhelming even if its meaning remains elusive. The truck that followed them pulls up at the circle's rim and idles, its horn sounding once with a deep, bone-vibrating bellow. The trailer door gleams with fresh paint and a chilling message drips like oil. Refuel complete. Follow memory route. This command reveals the cruel purpose of the place, a trap requiring the narrator to keep fueling and following a predetermined cycle. Easing into the spiral, the narrator notes that each driver's seat is empty, no other person visible, but they feel watched from every windshield, as if invisible versions of themselves sit cataloging their next moves. Anxiety manifests physically, breath quickening into shallow gasps, fingers tingling with pins and needles. At the spiral center is a pedestal bearing a cracked compass needle wildly spinning, next to a pump nozzle identical to the one at the fueling station, dripping the same viscous green fuel. The hose vanishes into the concrete, connected to an ominous plaque inscribed in red. One fill, one remaining life. The narrator recoils, heart pounding. Around the circle, dozens of trucks flash the word choose repeatedly in unison, signaling an impossible decision. They realize the eco-diesel fuel bought them space in this liminal junction, a place outside normal geography, a stitched-together zone of impossible coordinates that shouldn't coexist. To refuse fueling means a gradual erosion, losing identity and memory a kilometer at a time until they no longer recognize themselves or the steering wheel. To accept means staying trapped, fueling the next arrival, perhaps becoming the silent driver behind the next lost soul. A flickering memory of the narrator's mother singing a lullaby hovers on the brink of collapse, fragile yet vital, a talisman against dissolution. Beneath the concrete, some hidden reservoir waits, ominous and waiting. Finally, the narrator kills the engine, plunging the scene into heavy, absolute silence. Dylan stares wide-eyed, breathing ragged. The narrator whispers that if they stay together, maybe something different might be possible. I circled the lot again. It wasn't wide, but it felt endless, unfolding in the dark like a wound. Gravel crackled under the tires, grinding like old bones. Red tail lights blinked ahead in slow, arterial pulses. I could hear my heart echoing them. The scent hit next. Not fuel, something else. Burnt rubber, but undercut by the dry, fibrous stink of hay. The big rig idling nearby wasn't hauling livestock. That smell shouldn't have been there. I rolled up beside the pump. The nozzle felt warm, sticky with something I didn't want to name. The only light was a single green button, Eco. I pressed it. The hose jerked violently, like something waking up. Liquid surged through it, thick, sluggish, not diesel. It sounded wrong as it poured, made a hollow glug glug glug, like a throat trying to clear itself. The smell turned sour. Pine resin mixed with ozone, sharp and stinging. My stomach flipped. I kept holding the nozzle. The screen blinked. My name vanished, replaced by a stream of numbers, coordinates. They repeated, each time slower, like a whisper dying out. I didn't know what they meant. I didn't want to. The pump clicked off at 1313. The tank was still half empty. I hung up the nozzle. My pulse pounded in my throat. Dylan climbed out, swearing when he saw the thick green residue around the fuel cap. "That's not diesel," he said. "That's something else." I couldn't meet his eyes. "We don't have another option," I said. My voice cracked. He stared at me a moment longer, then shivered and got back in the car. The engine started on the first turn, which somehow made it worse. We pulled away, or tried to. The truck was there now, parked across the exit like a dog lying across a doorway. His grill gleamed like teeth. His headlights flashed once, then again, then faster. Morse code. Fail. I stopped breathing. Sweat stung my eyes. My hands slipped on the wheel. The truck backed up an inch, just enough to let us through. We didn't wait. We hit the highway, but the highway didn't feel like it remembered us. The odometer rolled forward, paused, slid backward. Then the numbers collapsed into nonsense. Symbols, dashes, half-letters. I felt a thread snap behind my eyes, a soft pop of something vital unraveling. I couldn't remember my first job, or what my mother's kitchen smelled like in summer. The memory of sunlight on linoleum had been there. Now it was just noise. Outside the window, the guardrails blurred. The trees looked painted. Fake. Too green, too still. I blinked. There were 5 lanes now. Then 3. Then 1. It ended in a stretch of road I'd never seen on any map. The radio flickered on. Static. Then the same rhythm as the truck's lights. Inside my head this time, like someone tapping on bone. Dylan pointed. "Look." His voice came from behind me, though he was beside me. My lungs burned. Breathing felt like sucking air through iced cloth. We couldn't stop. I knew that. If we stopped, I'd forget how to stop. The car shook as I pressed forward. The road narrowed to a tunnel of floodlights. Above us, a massive glowing sign. 51.8006 degrees north. 0.0114 degrees east. The same coordinates from the pump. I drove under it. A cold flush wiped across my mind. Every memory of high school drained out of me like warm water. I gripped the wheel until my bones ached. The road opened into a massive concrete circle. Floodlights ringed the space, mounted on poles with no visible wiring. Too tall, too bright, unreal. At the center, a spiral of parking bays stretched inward, each slot filled with a car identical to ours. Not similar, identical. Same model, same make. Some were blue, some red. One was matte gray. Some had license plates from the 1980s. One from the future. All of them idled silently. I gagged, tasted bile. Dylan's voice was a whisper. I've seen this place before. In a dream, I think. His eyes were full of tears. I didn't ask why. Behind us, the truck pulled in, parked at the rim of the circle. His horn sounded once, low and long, the kind of sound that vibrates through teeth and ribs. The trailer door was slick with fresh paint. Words dripped down the side, thick and black. Refuel complete. Follow memory route. I took my foot off the brake. The car rolled forward into the spiral. We passed our doubles. One by one. Empty driver's seats. No passengers. But I felt them watching us. Every windshield held a presence. Each one a version of me waiting. At the center of the spiral was a concrete pedestal. On it, a compass. Cracked. The needle spun in circles faster and faster. Beside it, another pump. Same shape. Same hose. Green fuel dripped from its nozzle. Etched into the concrete in red paint or blood. One fill. One remaining life. I swallowed hard. Around the ring, the other trucks flashed their lights. Together. In rhythm. HOSE. The coordinates had bought me space. But it wasn't free. This place wasn't anywhere. It was a memory landfill. A maze stitched together from moments and mistakes. A trap that moved when you tried to map it. If I refused to refuel, I would forget who I was. Piece by piece. Each mile a memory. If I fueled again, I'd never leave. I'd join the spiral. Fuel the next one who came. I remembered a song. My mother's voice humming at bedtime. The lyrics were gone. But the hum stayed. Somewhere beneath the concrete, something vast waited. Feeding. Watching. I turned off the engine. Silence fell like a lid. Dylan didn't move. His eyes were wide. His breath came in sharp pulls. If we stay together, I said, not sure if I meant it. Maybe we could stop it. Maybe we couldn't.